Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all the places at Hawk Blogger. And we're at that point of the season where teams are doing their mini camps, their OTAs, and some of them are done. So we are going to make a tour around the NFC West, and we are starting with Darren Urban of the Arizona Cardinals to help catch us up on everything going on down in the desert. How are you doing this morning, Darren?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And as it's your first time on, a good chance for folks to get to know you a little bit. You are, in Seahawks fans' parlance, you're kind of the John Boyle of the Arizona Cardinals. Is that right?
That's probably fair. I hope John appreciates the comparison. But yes, I've been covering this team for more than 25 years. I covered them for a number of years at a newspaper, and then in 2007, I got hired to come in-house. And I'd like to think that I do a pretty good job considering my position. And obviously, I've seen a lot of Cardinals football over the years, and Seahawks for that matter, given the fact
Yes.
that we see you twice a year. So
Yes, kind of tied at the hip. And yeah, you and John both do an excellent job. I've talked to John plenty about this. It's an interesting role to go from an outside third party journalist to then going inside, and you get all this access, but what you're able to share changes, but finding ways to actually give insights is a talent and a skill. And I've certainly appreciated that from you over the years. You're definitely a must follow. It's at Cards Chatter, not Darren Urban. If you're looking for Darren Urban,
yeah,
you gotta look for Cards Chatter out there, at least on Twitter. So Darren, I got to tell you before we get into the Cardinals, I saw a clip this morning of the LA Rams arriving in Maui for their mini
yes.
camp. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be making a case to the Seahawks that they need to change their mini camp location next year.
I will say that when the Rams first announced that, I mentioned it to my wife, and she was very upset that it wasn't the Cardinals doing it. I made the point that, yeah, I probably would have been flying out with a team. That doesn't necessarily mean you would be going, but I think we probably would have found a way one way or the other. But yeah, look, hey, props to the Rams and whoever whoever that might have been able to take the trip with them out there to cover it. But I guess we'll just, for me, I was just going to have to stick to minicamp in 105 degrees. So
I was going to say, unlike other folks, it would have been a step down in temperature for you. It's like going to Alaska, going from Arizona in June to Maui. So
it's funny you say that because I'm actually about to take some vacation, and I'm going to be flying into Seattle later this week to do an Alaska cruise. So there's that.
Oh,
So,
well, enjoy. I've
thank you.
certainly made my fair share of trips up to Alaska. Usually for me, it's late July for a salmon run, but
Yeah.
the cruise I think is supposed to be really great too. So, Darren, the Cardinals have concluded their OTAs and mini camps, and a lot of interesting storylines going on there. I'm curious, what were the things you were watching going into those, and what did you find that maybe caught your attention coming out of them?
I will say, Brian, that it's kind of weird. Like for me, and I'll be posting a story actually tomorrow about my takeaways kind of from the off season. It's kind of tough to do takeaways from minicamp directly. We are allowed to watch all of the minicamp practices, but the reporting, and this is not just me, this is across the media, it's limited to the first 20 minutes of each of those three practices. So obviously the good stuff kind of has to be more put to the back of the head as kind of general knowledge rather than stuff you're going to be able to report on. So it's a little tough. But for me, the off season, if I had to talk about the big things that kind of struck me with this team, number one, the running back with a wide receiver core, which a lot of people weren't sure if they were going to add somebody, and they've decided, hey, we believe that Marvin Harrison is going to make a big jump in year two, that Michael Wilson can really be the right number two receiver, and that we're comfortable with a tight end like Trey McBride being one of our top targets, which I'm okay with. That makes a lot of sense to me. A couple other the quick things that came to mind. They're going to be young at cornerback, but they've invested a ton of draft capital over the last three drafts in cornerback, and that's kind of the direction that they want to go. They're one veteran, Sean Murphy Bunting, got hurt off the field, away from the facility this offseason. He's already going to miss the year, so you're going to be youthful in that cornerback room. But they're okay with that, in part because of the third biggest takeaway, which is they've dramatically upgraded the defensive line. They've had 2 first-round picks in the defensive line in the last 2 drafts. They've added a ton of veterans: Dalvin Tomlinson, Calais Campbell. Justin Jones was last year. Where their defensive line is now compared to where it was last year, tremendous difference, and I think it's going to make a tremendous difference. Josh Sweat on the pass rush, it's going to make a tremendous difference on this defense.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I did my show yesterday looking through the NFC West defensive tackles. So not the edge players like Josh Sweat, but the defensive tackles. And I really like what Arizona did, and bringing back Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson. They've got some good talent there. And then you draft Walter Nolan and Darius Robinson. I'm guessing I want to hear about those 2 first-round picks and expectations there. But Mike Clay of ESPN, I went through to look at his rankings. I had the Cardinals 3rd out of the 4 NFC West teams for defensive interior. I thought, improved. Mike Clay had him tied with the Seahawks for, among the best in the NFL. So there's some big expectations out there, and it would be a big difference. I happen to really like Roy Lopez. I thought he was a really good player for you guys last year, but I can't say that it's a step down with Dalvin Tomlinson and Calais Campbell. So let's talk a little bit about those 2 first-round picks. Darius Robinson obviously kind of was an edge tackle tweener. Have they figured out how they want to use him yet? And then Walter Nolan, who incredibly talented interior defensive tackle, a little bit, certainly a different style of player than either Calais Campbell or Dalvin Tomlinson. So what are your thoughts on those 2?
Well, I mean, they are trying to get to where most teams are right now, where the Eagles rode their Super Bowl title to what this team and the Seahawks, for that matter, have seen for a number of years when Aaron Donald was wreaking havoc in the middle of the defensive line. That seems to be, I mean, you want your edge rushers, but you want guys that can cause a problem in the middle of the line. And that is what they're hoping Darius Robinson and Walter Nolan can be, especially in 3rd down situations. Darius Robinson looked incredible in training camp last year, and then literally in the week before we got to the regular season, hurt his calf in practice, and basically it wiped out his rookie season. He did play 6 games at the end of the year, but he was not fully healthy, and you could tell he was not the same player that he had been in training camp. He's fully healthy now. And then you draft Nolan, who was okay his first couple of years in college in Texas A&M, really took off last year at Ole Miss. They believe these guys can be the kind of the interior game wreckers that so many teams want now. And so I believe Nolan's learning curve is going to be interesting because obviously he's a rookie, and you're putting him in a room where there are all these other guys who can get rotational play. But I think they're counting on Darius Robinson to kind of, now that he's healthy, pick up where he left off in training camp, which looked unbelievable, and be able to make that kind of impact as you go forward. And again, like we were talking about, and you add a Dalvin Tomlinson or a Calais Campbell, who he said, Calais, look, I can still dominate. Now I can only dominate 30 to 35 plays a game, but if you keep me to that number, I can make a big difference. So I think that's what the hope is. Again, you don't know what's going to happen with injuries, but it's a tremendous difference. I think they would have liked to keep Roy Lopez. He ended up going to Detroit. That's fine. They move on to a different area. I just think overall they're in a much better place.
Yeah, I think people, the Cardinals are perpetually, a team that's had challenges kind of getting over the top. And so I think they get slept on a little bit. They're one of only 2 teams in the NFC West that were top 15, top 20 in DVOA for offense, special teams, and defense, all 3 phases. The Seahawks were the other. And, if the Cardinals had flipped the games with the Seahawks, if just that was different for that team last year, they win the division. So, how do the Cardinals kind of think about this division? Where do you feel like the Cardinals see themselves relative to the other teams in the division?
It's funny you bring up the Seahawks games because ultimately, I think that was probably the most disappointing stretch of the season for this team. In between those games, they went to Minnesota and should have beat a very good Vikings team and kind of fizzled at the end and ended up losing a game that they basically dominated. But the two Seahawks games, I mean, I think their performances in those games were incredibly disappointing, and that's how they felt about them. And it like you said, it cost them what could have been a nice jump season. I think going into this year, I think they feel they are capable of competing. Are they sitting there saying we should be the favorites? No, I don't think they're thinking that. But when again, like anything else, Brian, I mean, you go into the third year of a coaching staff. They've rebuilt this roster over 3 years. This is kind of put up or shut up time for NFL teams when you go through this kind of rebuild. You don't normally get this kind of runway. They were in a terrible place when Gannon and Ossenfort came in with this regime. So they did have a little bit more room to work. But now you're kind of here. And I think if you look across the landscape of this division, I mean, I think you can make an argument for all four teams winning this division. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're way off base. I mean, everybody's going to be optimistic this time of year, but I think you legitimately can make an argument for all these teams. And I think that's where the Cardinals are right now. I think they feel like if they play like they're capable of playing, that they can do some really good things. Now, the problem this team has had over the years is, start, especially into the Kyler Murray era, when you have had decent success, you start really strong, you fade down the stretch. Can't do that this year. And I was just looking at the schedule this year that they've had late buys the last few years. This year, they're right smack dab in the middle. They come out of the bye Monday night at Dallas, at Seattle, and then home against San Francisco. To me, I think they're going to get off to a good start. To me, if they can play well and win a couple of those first 3 games out of the bye, obviously a couple of division games, I think that would set a tone that they desperately need to have. And if they don't do that out of the bye, it's going to be tough. Their closing schedule is not easy in the last 5-6 weeks. So they need to build up some wins and they need to show they can finish.
This might just be a very Seattle-centric selective memory, but I feel like the Seahawks games have kind of been a bellwether for the Cardinals over the years. When they've been a division-winning team, they've beaten the Seahawks, and when they haven't, they haven't. And so, it's going to be interesting to watch that matchup. Mike Macdonald versus Kyler Murray. I think, round 1 and 2 kind of went to Mike Macdonald. It'll be interesting to see what happens this next season. So I'm going to ask you to imagine something here. All right. So let's imagine that the season's finished. The regular season's done. The Cardinals have won the division. They've won 13 games. Okay. A lot of games.
Celebrating around here, Brian.
Yes. What will have had to have happened? What will have to have happened for that to occur this season for the Cardinals?
Okay, I'll give you 3 bullet points that I think has to happen in no particular order. I think Marvin Harrison is going to have to look like that guy that they took as a top 5 receiver. Now he has physically really worked hard to get bigger and stronger, and I think he is fully capable of having a big season. But obviously he's got to prove it on the field. And I think their passing game, I think the running game is already where it needs to be. Their passing game needs to take a next level. And I think that starts with Marvin Harrison. I think the idea of upgrading their defensive line and their edge was to point to the idea that they could get home with 4, which that's basic football. You can get home with 4 with the pass rush. All of a sudden giving Nick Rollis, the defensive coordinator, a ton more ability to be flexible. I don't think, we had this conversation before. Does upgrading the defense and allowing you to rush 4, does that make this defense more basic, or did Nick Rollis really go into the toolbox? Because he's kind of been famous for doing all kinds of crazy stuff defensively. I think he's going to lean into that even more. He'll have the ability to rush 4, but it gives him so many more options that when he wants to get super creative, it's going to be really tough for the offensives to deal with it, because that they could just bring 4 once in a while. So it's going to be more of a mystery. And then finally, and this is no secret, and this is every team out there, Kyler Murray has to raise his game. Kyler Murray has flashed over the years. He's had some fantastic moments. The consistency hasn't been there as much as they'd like. You need your quarterback to play at a high level consistently. And I think that's possible with him, but he needs to get there on a consistent basis. It's funny when we talk about quarterbacks and you talk about the Seahawks, the Cardinals never beat Geno Smith as a Seahawks quarterback as a starter. So there was much celebrating when they moved Geno Smith.
Yeah.
I know the Vikings beat the Cardinals last year, but they felt like they had an answer to Sam Darnold last year. So there's some. I maybe it's just me. I know for me, it's a sigh of relief that Geno Smith isn't back there. But for them to win 13 games, you're talking about knocking off. You're talking about playing really well in the division. If you win 13 games, I gotta think you're winning at least 4 and probably 5 of your 6 division games. And that's not going to be easy with the way this team is set up. But I think those 3 points, the Marvin Harrison thing, the defensive line being able to get home with 4 if they need to, and Kyler Murray being consistent, those are the things that pop into my head, that if they are really good, those are the things that have happened.
Makes sense. We're talking to Darren Urban of the Arizona Cardinals. And Darren, when we talk about this Cardinals team, there's a few players that have kind of piqued my interest from the draft I want to check in on. So Will Johnson was a guy that a lot of people had as maybe even a top 10 pick at some point, and he falls due to injury concerns all the way to the Cardinals in the second round. Has he yet been participating in OTAs and mini camps yet?
He actually did quite a bit in regular everything up and even in OTAs. I think he did quite a bit. They dialed him back a little bit because of hamstring issues. I don't know about issues. I think they just wanted to be kind of safe. This team has leaned really hard into, like most teams, they've leaned hard into the sports science and how many reps a guy's had. I think there was a couple of guys, even rookies, they were giving lesser days off during OTAs and mini camps to kind of watch how much they're working going into camp. Jonathan Gannon said last week, Will Johnson was limited in mini camp. He did do some stuff. I know there was some tweets out there that he was sitting out practices. That wasn't true. He was out there every day in his helmet. He did at least some stuff. He just didn't do everything. And we've been told he's going to be ready for training camp. So I don't think there's a worry there in terms of the injuries. I mean, we'll see what happens. I know they were thrilled that he was there. And again, you're talking about a team that has spent second-round picks on cornerbacks the last 2 years. Will Johnson this year, Max Melton the year before. Again, I think they want to lean into these young, talented cornerbacks. And if you're drafting cornerbacks that high, you're expecting them to play a lot. Now, I don't think it's a guarantee that he's starting given everybody else they have right now, but I think they'd like for that to happen. And if you're drafting a guy that talented who, like you said, a lot of people were saying could be a top 15 pick, I think you'd like to see him win a job right away.
All right. A couple other names. Denzel Burke, another cornerback from Ohio State. As a guy that was playing very well in the last year, I think had a little bit of problems with getting handsy and getting some pass interference calls. Where do you see him fitting on this team?
I think that's a great question. I wonder, I think it's pretty clear that Sean Murphy-Bunting's injury, a season-ending injury, was known before the draft. Mm-hmm. So, you wonder if Denzel Burke is a pick if Murphy-Bunting had been healthy. That said, again, they've been trying to rebuild this secondary. So here's where they sit at cornerback when it comes to Burke and just the overall thing. We talked about Johnson. We talked about Max Melton. They have Garrett Williams, who's a 2023 third-round pick, who's already kind of established himself as one of the better slot corners in the league. So they love him. And he played really well last year. They have Starling Thomas, one time, I don't know if he was undrafted. I think he might have been drafted late by the Lions, got cut in 2023. They brought him in. He started whatever it's been, 28 games, 30 games the last 2 years, done some nice things. So he's got experience in his couple years in the league. And then you also have Elijah Jones, who was a third-round pick last year, missed the whole season with foot injury. But, the dude's 6'1", he's quick. I think he's kind of an unknown, but nobody's talking about him because he missed his whole rookie year. And you're talking about a 3rd-round pick who's a 6'1" guy. I'm like, he's going to be in the mix, I would think. So when you talk about Burke, talking about those other guys, plus Melton, plus Will Johnson, I mean, Burke's going to have to work hard just to make the team. But again, like I said, they put so much draft capital and work into these young cornerbacks. You're figuring they're going to be able to find a handful that hopefully will hit.
I told you I keep you for 20. Do you have a couple more minutes? If
I do
ask
I do have a couple
questions
minutes
here.
sure.
So last two. Jordan Birch,
Yes.
fascinating player to me. Looks like an edge, but also looks like a defensive tackle. Do you know how the team's looking at him so far? Where they think they might use him?
I think for a team that loves versatility, for a team that has a defensive coordinator that at times would stick outside linebacker Zaven Collins into the A gap just to mess with the offenses, I think Jordan Birch is exactly the kind of guy they love to have. I don't think he's going to have – I mean, they might work him one place specifically early on so he's not overwhelmed. But I think in the end, they're going to see a guy who could play interior in pass rush situations, could jump outside to set the edge in rundown situations, will definitely play both. And if he's quick enough to do some things on the edge, I think he's a perfect kind of guy for the defense that they want to run. I don't want to say he's exactly like Darius Robinson. I mean, Darius Robinson is a little bit bigger, and I think they see Darius Robinson more as a disruptor inside. But you could bounce him outside once in a while in a freaky situation. I think Birch is the opposite. You bounce him inside in those kinds of situations. So I think Birch is one of those guys that they're going to use all over the place, and a guy that can be really versatile when they need him to be.
All right, last question for you, Darren. You look across the NFC West. What's your kind of take on the division? You mentioned that any of these teams could win. What are the things that kind of caught your eye this offseason across the NFC West?
I thought it was interesting that your team changed quarterbacks. I kind of get it. But it's always tough. And I understand when you're in a position like Seattle, and quite frankly, the consistency with Kyler Murray, they want him to be their franchise guy, but at some point you're going to have to show that you can get further down the road. It's hard when you don't have a quarterback to get a quarterback, especially when you're in a position like these teams where you're not going to be bad. You might not be great, but you're not going to be bad, so you're not going to be drafting high enough. I like a lot of the things that the Seahawks have done in terms of their defense, and what McDonald is doing up there reminds me a lot of what Gannon did when he first showed up here. They've come in, and not that the Seahawks weren't physical before. Obviously, the Cardinals had further to go, but these two teams feel like, hey, we're going to have throwback teams to like 1997. We're going to play hard defense and run the ball and do what we have to do passing wise, but that's the kind of idea we want to have. The Rams, I love what they've done. What they did defensively last year, considering they had no quote unquote names, I think was fantastic. And Stafford he's just been a pain in the butt for a long time. He's still a really, really good quarterback. And again, I still think this is a quarterback driven league, and I think they have the best quarterback in the division. And the 49ers, I think they've lost a lot, and they're starting to get older, but I'm not going to count them out. And the fact that they ended up finishing last year gives them 2 games that none of the rest of the teams in the division get to play. I think the Bears are better, and the Browns could be better, but they're still the Bears and the Browns, and that's 2 games the 49ers get to play that the rest of these teams don't. So I think this division's wide open. I think injuries are going to play a huge role. I think consistent quarterback play is going to play a huge role. And like I said, I'm not going to be surprised if any of these teams win the division. I know there's high hopes within the Cardinals organization that they're going to make a push for the playoffs, but when you're playing in a division like this, it's going to be difficult. So I'm far from a prediction process in terms of who's going to win, but I won't be surprised if any of these teams end up at the top of the division.
It's great stuff, Darren. And one thing is sure, the Cardinals always seem to figure into how the division ends up. Even that last game in LA and the interception in the end zone, there was a lot of Seahawks fans that were just like, oh my God, how did that happen?
Yeah, well, there's a
So
lot of Cardinal fans who said the same thing. So,
well, here's to hoping Arizona has a great year. And I know a lot of Seahawks fans will wish them nothing but luck against the 49ers and the Rams coming into 2025. Darren, thanks so much for joining the show. It was great to see you.
thanks for having me, Brian.
All right. That is Darren Urban of ArizonaCardinals.com. Great stuff from Darren and someone who I've been hoping to get on the show for a while. Glad we were able to get him today. And I'm telling you that like the Cardinals are a team that they're just easy to kind of ignore and maybe just set aside because I don't want to, hang it on Darren there, but this team, that franchise has lost more games than any other NFL franchise in the history of the sport. Like that is a losing franchise historically. But that said, they have moments where they raise up, they rise up and they surprise. And last year, this was a team that was 6-4 going into their bye week and going to Seattle to play the Seahawks. They were absolutely contending for the division and they lost. They lost to the Seahawks and then they lost a game to the Vikings that they absolutely should have won. And then they lost to the Seahawks again. And that 3-game stretch, those 3 losses pretty much ended their division title hopes and really their playoff hopes. And even with all the, kudos that the Rams get last year, the Rams got absolutely destroyed by the Cardinals, 41-10 in the first game. And then in the second game, in a game that the Rams needed at home to cement the division, the Cardinals should have won that game. They had him at the goal line, throw an interception, and that was that. So the Cardinals are just kind of they're a team that I admit that I have a hard time taking seriously because of Kyler Murray. I just ultimately believe he's not a guy that seems to step up when you need him to. He's not a guy that seems to handle adversity well. And I don't have a lot of confidence in players or quarterbacks who kind of shrink in the biggest moments, or that when they get punched, they just stay on the canvas, that they don't get up and punch back. And for all the things that, plenty of people had to say about Geno Smith, one thing you could never say about Geno Smith, whether it's his career or during a game, is if something bad happened, he never let that keep him from making the next great play. And Russell Wilson was similar. Like, how many times were, things going awfully, and then he turns it on and has a great finishing flourish. I just don't see that with Kyler Murray. I really just don't. And so that limits my expectations for that team. But it's not hard for me to look at the Arizona Cardinals and say, you know what? Their problem last year, they really were under talented on defense. They did not have great personnel. Well, if Will Johnson works out at corner, if Denzel Burke, if Elijah Jones, if Max Melton takes a jump in a second, if their cornerback position takes a jump, Garrett Williams is already a great nickel corner. He's great. He's in the conversation for definitely top 5 nickel corners in the NFL. He could be in the conversation for top 3. So if you get your outside corners in a better position where they are actually contributing, and you get a defensive line now with Josh Sweat, maybe a healthy Darius Robinson, there's, if Walter Nolan works out and is a disruptive player, that defense could take a really big leap this year. And that alone could lower the bar for Kyler Murray. He might not have to do as much if the defense ends up being one of the better defenses in the NFL. So I like that about them. I personally do have questions about that receiver room. Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson's very predictable and good. He's a very solid player. I think he's a better third receiver than a second receiver, but I think he's very solid. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is incredibly talented, but he and Kyler Murray have not seemed like a good match so far. So I wonder about that group. I also wonder about James Conner, who I think has been their heart and soul for the last few years. James Conner is getting older. James Conner is, I want to say, is he 30 yet? If he's not, he's heading toward that age. Let me pull it up real quick. James Conner is 30. And he had some injuries last year. He runs incredibly hard. Is he going to be able to repeat his performance? Because if he's not, someone else is going to have to make up for it. Trey Benson, who they drafted last year, was not that impressive. So I do have some questions on the running back. They got rid of Will Hernandez, who was injured at guard, and they replaced him with Isaiah Adams, who's a younger player at guard. They have a little bit of offensive line questions as well. So it kind of, there's definitely some question marks in there. But when Kyler Murray is front running, when he's able to create havoc with his legs, and when he's had a receiver that he has a really good rapport with, like DeAndre Hopkins, that's when the Cardinals offense becomes really dangerous. And so if he's developed that with Marvin Harrison Jr. or whomever, Trey McBride obviously is one of the most talented young tight ends in the NFL, had over 100 catches last year. There's something there. This team won 8 games. They won 8 games despite that 3-game slide, losing 2 to the Seahawks, losing that game late to the Vikings, losing that game at the 1-yard line to the Rams. You win 2 of those 4 games, you're at 10 wins. If you win 3, you're at 11. And they were very clearly 3 games that they could have won. So I'm very curious about this team. I like some of the youth. I like some of what they have on the roster. I think the coaching has been certainly caught the attention of many of the national analysts, the geeky analysts, the film watchers who really like what Jonathan Gannon and his staff have done on offense and on defense. But they haven't really had the personnel to be more than just kind of intriguing. Is this the year that they're more than that? I think that's going to be a team to watch. And like I said in talking to Darren, it really is one of those situations where the Seahawks have kind of treated the Cardinals like little brothers. They just beat them all the time, except the seasons where Arizona is the division champ, like the Carson Palmer years or some of the Kurt Warner years. There were years where the Cardinals got on top. You might even forget it. This was a different year, but 2013, toward the end of that Super Bowl season, Seahawks had finished with some games at home in December, and one of the games they lost was to Carson Palmer and the Cardinals. That was a very concerning game at the time. It was an ugly game, lots of turnovers, and did not work out well. All right, we got a couple super chats here. Lucas has become a YouTube member. Lucas, welcome to the crew. Great to have you. Would love to have as many people join as a member as possible. And guess what? Bryce Coots has gifted 10 Hawk Blogger memberships. So if you have not been a member, all you got to do is look how to turn gifting on your YouTube account. Just do a quick Google search. It'll show you how to do it. And then like the show, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 21,000 subscribers. Comment, watch as much as you can, and you will get one of these free memberships that Bryce has just donated. So Bryce, thank you so much. I got to go on Bryce's podcast last night. I think it's called Hawk Zone. So keep an eye out for that. That was fun to be on there with Bryce and talk Hawks. So that was a good conversation. And look, this is going to be fun this week going through all the NFC West. Tomorrow, Grant Cohen. We're going to talk 49ers with our buddy Grant. Friday, we are going to talk with a Rams insider as well. So, and then Thursday is going to be a very special one. I can't wait. I got a mystery guest who you will really like. So we'll have that on Thursday. And Friday, as I said, Adam Grosbard that covers the LA Rams will be with me to talk about where the Rams are and what's going on with them. So good chance to catch up around the division. And then I've got some other folks I'm going to try to bring on the following week. So we're going to fill this, what is typically a dead zone in NFL coverage, with, I think, a lot of great stuff. Make sure you've liked, make sure you subscribe, make sure you have joined over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. You join now and you get free ad-free audio. You get access to the Discord channel where there's conversations constantly going on. And you get verified on hbtix.com, hbtix.com, the only place where you as a Seahawks fan can make sure when you sell a ticket, it goes to a Seahawks fan. You have control. You can verify the person you're selling to is a Seahawks fan. And I've got all the guidelines in there for how to safely transfer these tickets, avoid scams, avoid 49ers fans, all that stuff. So hbtix.com, make sure you signed up. And every week you'll get an email with all of the available tickets. There's dozens of tickets up there right now, including games for the season opener against the 49ers. So head over to hbtix.com, hbtix.com, and check out what's up there. Let's get as many of you in seats as possible. All right, folks. Appreciate all of you for joining. I will see you all very soon. Until next time, I am Brian Emhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care.